Power, Bryant. How goes it, good man?
What's up, Blake? How are you this evening, man?
I am doing well, but I will tell you, there's a lot of freaked out people. There's some additions in the portal. Your favorite player in LSU history is now officially a Tiger. Never caught a pass at LSU, but Xavier Thomas is here. Looks like Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas are playing in the bowl game. Garrett Nussmeier going to be QB1. We got a lot to discuss, but I'm going to let you choose, my friend. What do you want to discuss first?
Well, it's the big story today for me, Blake. There is not one person who won today more than Garrett Nussmeier. First off, he started watching too much AYS, and he said, look, I got to grow a beard. So he's got the beard going now. Okay, he's becoming a man.
He does.
All right. So let's just roll through everything that happened today. Okay, so it was finally confirmed.
You want to start with Jayden Daniels?
Yeah, so it was already known, Blake, that he wasn't going to play a bowl game. You could kind of see it last week. And it was also known, as you alluded to a minute ago, that LSU aggressively searched for some type of quarterback in the portal, right? In the middle of a Heisman Trophy run for Jayden Daniels, going up to New York City. There's a reason why Joe Sloan went to go meet with Morris in his apartment in North Carolina. LSU really wanted to get a quarterback locked into this room. A lot of it is because of the reason that you just stated, what happened to Florida State, but a lot of it is just experience. So, you're Garrett Nussmeier. A.D. Swann from Vanderbilt is a guy that's coming into the portal. Now, I do agree. He is experienced, and he does have some really good throws on tape. And on top of that, a lot of experience, right? He's got starts. That's always a good thing. That's something that Garrett Nussmeier does not have. But, number one, he doesn't run. He has some running ability. He does show a willingness to run, in particular the UNLV game. He had some really good runs in that game. But he's probably the same speed as like a Tom Brady, if you will. He can't really run all that well at all. And the second thing, Blake, is A.J. Swann is not that great, okay? Can he turn into something? Yes, he's going only into year 3. But last year, if you look at his QBRs and some of the interceptions that he threw, Blake, they were bad. They're really, really bad. So Garrett Nussmeier, and you can't beat out A.J. Swann for the starting role when you have all this experience on him in the room. That is, it wasn't ever meant to be at LSU. So big W for Garrett Nussmeier because I think this locks in him being the starter next year.
I'm going to disagree with you on one thing. I think we got to be careful of saying how bad a quarterback can be after we just saw Jayden Daniels win a Heisman, and his last year at Arizona State was not good at all. Like, let's call it what it is. I mean, he had some really challenging stuff. And Carter, he's playing against Georgia, and he's at Vandy, right? Like, right. He's having to make throws not on time to have any form of chance of winning the game or winning the rep. I think that his 2022 film was a lot better because, look, he had a 10-2 TD to touchdown ratio. I think the kid can get better there. Let's go to your first point. You said there's not a bigger winner today more than Garrett Nussmeier. Carter, this is the ultimate prove me game. You're in a bowl game. You got 2 first-round wide receivers. You got to go make something happen. If you can't make something happen in this game, then there's going to be question marks. How do you foresee Garrett being able to do in this game?
I think he'll do well, but this is the biggest win of them all. For the whole LSU staff, Jayden Daniels gets to end on a high note, all right? The second thing is Garrett Nussmeier gets his first start. This is what LSU fans have been anticipating for quite some time, right? What would an offense look like with Garrett Nussmeier? And the big thing today, Blake, was Brian Kelly acknowledged that you do have to move some things around and change some things as far as a game plan is good for him to succeed. Now, going back to A.J. Swann, I do agree with you with the Jayden Daniels thing. I do think Jayden was a better collegiate player at Arizona State than A.J. Swann was at Vanderbilt. But one thing I would say, though, in A.J. Swann's defense, he was put in a lot of tough situations. Protection just breaking down. And it blew me away how many times he really had to throw the football into heavy coverage just to try and make a play. And some of his mistakes were via that. But, man, there was some good things with that. Now, as far as the Garrett Nussmeier start is concerned, guess what? He's going to have really good receivers to throw to him. Neighbors and Bryant Jr. confirmed playing in this game. So it's obviously a really good thing as well. Now, Blake, once again, you've played the game. You understand this because you've been in collegiate locker rooms. You're the guy. Garrett Nussmeier, this is the 4 years you have been grinding for this opportunity, for everything to be built around you, and you're going to get a New Year's Day bowl game versus Wisconsin team that's probably one of the worst teams playing on New Year's Day. So this really sets up nicely for him. I think Garrett's going to succeed.
I think he's got to go out there and prove that he can do something. Like, look, do I think Garrett's going to be fine? Yes. Do I think that he has a lot of time that he's got to grow? Yeah. Like, I mean, to expect him to come in here and not make a mistake against Wisconsin is stupid. Like, if you think he's going to come in here and just nuss bust on the way, here comes the nuss bust, he's going to, light everything up. That's not a fair thing for you to assume that he can do. What I do think, is fair. You got to make quick and smart decisions. You got just get the ball to number 8. All else fails. Everything else fails. Get the ball to number 8 because the last thing you want people remembering is you going into Georgia, you throwing 300 yards and a half on the national champion. You go out in Wisconsin, you start smacking that ass. Okay, then you got something rolling here. But I will say this. I think that A.J. Swann, for LSU's current makeup, meaning what they have in that room, is the best quarterback in the portal right now that has the experience because he can be a bridge guy. And number 2, he can push Garrett enough to get him over that hump. Now, let me ask you this.
Do you think he can beat out Garrett for the starter's job next year?
Not at this exact moment, no.
Okay.
But he also, is not going to have 2 first-round wide receivers either. Sure. That we know of. All right? So, again, I don't know. Look, there's something to be said, Carter. There's something to be said for a dude that has 400 passing attempts in the SEC.
Yeah. Yeah. And this will be the best.
He almost has as many passing touchdowns as Garrett Nussmeier has attempts this season.
And one more thing, he's going to have the best offensive line and coaching staff he's going to have in his career. So it's huge.
Hear me and hear me now. Listen to your buddy. If you think that Brian Kelly and Clark Lee didn't have long conversations about A.J. Swann, you damn fool. Clark Lee might be fired next year. So I'm just saying. All right. Xavier Thomas, your favorite player in LSU's football history, has just entered the portal and is now an LSU Tiger. How excited are you? Uh-oh.
I'm right here.
Oh,
I'm right here cooking, baby.
You were kind of going in and out. Xavier Thomas, an LSU Tiger, your favorite Tiger of all time. What do you think?
He's one of my favorite Louisiana recruits at the skill position player position that I've ever watched. I mean, his high school tape was just a thing of beauty. The speed, the ability to just make guys miss, and we've seen that up to this point, Blake. I was shocked that Mississippi State didn't try to use him more as a receiver, as true freshman. They were a little at wide receiver, though, right? They had some really good pieces there. So this past year, when Will Rogers went out, they started working him in more with the wide receivers, and Blake, he kept making plays. I mean, really difficult catches. We just did a full film study on his most difficult catches, and he played really well in the Egg Bowl, his final game as a Mississippi State player. This is a guy who wanted to be Well, I'll say this: he was interested in LSU last year. He entered the portal last year, and now we're at this point where he gets the opportunity to come play for the home school. So this is a guy who loves LSU. This is a guy that's a dream spot for him. And I think if you actually sat down and watched him, and not just look at his recruiting ranking, and not just look at what was at Mississippi State and some of these yards were in garbage time on a bad team. The dude can really freaking play. Now, he's not the biggest guy. LSU historically has had, most of receivers be over 6 foot. He's a solid 5'10", 5'11" kind of guy. But Blake, I just think he's really good.
He's 5'10", I'll give you $100,000.
Huh?
The 5'10", buddy. I promise you.
He's a unit. I mean, he is a stocky, muscular guy, right? So I love him. Body control. He's got it all. He's got that dog in him too.
He's everything we thought Aaron Anderson would be this year.
Right. And I think I was on this show and I was on my channel. I was like, God, and once again, this was part of just my evaluations of them coming out. I really wanted Xavier Thomas to be a part of LSU last year, but now we get to have him this year. And the good thing about that is now it's really going to push Aaron Anderson. It's really going to push Chris Hill. And it's going to push a lot of these guys that don't have bona fide roles in next year's offense. So really pumped up about that. And I think he's going to be a nice player for LSU next year.
You know what? It's the biggest thing here. Carter, he averaged 33.7 yards per return and kick returns last year. 33.7. Can you imagine getting an offense to the opposite, like to the 33-yard line for a quarterback that hasn't even started a game yet? He'll have one start underneath his belt. Oh, and by the way, he's averaging over a first down in punt return yardage. Do I think that he can come in here and be a good receiver? Actually, I'm going to be honest with you. I think he's going to be your wide receiver too. I 1,000% think, because Carter, look what he did at Mississippi State.
Yeah.
I mean, again, there's something to be said about doing not only the punt returns, the kick returns in the SEC. Carter's got 40 catches and 500 yards in the SEC last year, and Mississippi State offensively was asshole. They were so bad. 1 week they're in 12 personnel running the football under center. The next week they're going full Mike Leach air raid.
Yeah, that's what's crazy is Blake, so many of these plays he made were very difficult. They were high difficulty type of catches. And, you look at him and you think he's kind of like a slot guy, but a lot of it was just him on the outside, just mossing people, one-handed grabs. That was really his patented thing, the one-handed grab. Even in the spring game last year, he had one. It's crazy watching him play. So really excited about him, excited as well with Jordan Gilbert, and hopefully LSU is able to get some of these higher name recruits in the portal. I think some of that is on the way. And look, I understand in this chat right now on Twitter, social media, my DMs, your DMs. Well, what about Ole freaking Miss?
All right, before we get to that, hold up. Before we get to that, hold on now. All right, before we get to that, can we talk on Jordan Gilbert? Because I got a whole segment I want to talk about Ole Miss on.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, what do you think? Before we do that, Rolo sends a $4.99 super chat, says, we need more stout D guys to shore up the D. Pause. But love the QB pickup, but we need more dogs out there to balance the team. What do you think? Thank you, Rolo, for the super chat. What do you think on Jordan Gilbert being added from Texas A&M?
Yeah, I agree with the super chat that LSU needs to keep building. But, yeah, Jordan Gilbert, very nice player, right? Obviously, last year, Blake, someone that you're very, very familiar with, Jacoby Matthews just beat him out, right? He ended up being, the better safety, and Jordan ended up getting hurt anyway. So, their safety situation was Bryce Anderson and Jacoby Matthews. Both those guys are really good football players. So now he gets to go to a safety room that has playing time wide open up for grabs at LSU, the home state school. He's from Baton Rouge, played at U High. So he's back technically on LSU's campus where he played his high school football.
Right.
Blake, a lot of Texas A&M fans were kind of victory lapping it because he had a bad missed tackle at the end of the Miami game. And it was bad, but he didn't play a game after that game. He was
Yeah,
hurt.
because he was hurt. Right.
Right. Like, I mean, could he have made that tackle? Sure, but he was probably banged up when he went out there to try and make that play. Blake, I do like him. I do. Are there some concerns about, his ceiling? Can he be something truly special? Maybe not, but what I could tell you, Blake, is the LSU safety room doesn't need special right now. They just need someone that, can start and play SEC football. And Jordan Gilbert did that as a true freshman, Blake. So it's a really, really nice pickup.
All right. Very quickly before we get to Ole Miss, Kyron Lacy announces that he's returning. Thoughts on that?
He gets a chance to be the guy. He showed you some guy tendencies, right? The Auburn game in particular. And I know it was against Georgia State, but he ran some absolutely filthy routes in that game as well. This is his chance, right, to be the number one option. Now, I'd be interested to know what the chat thinks about this and how you think about this. Do you think he could be a bona fide number one? That maybe not Malik Neighbors good, but do you think he can be Terrence Tolliver good? Do you think he can be some kind of a Ruben Randall type of player?
I think I honestly, here's my God's honest opinion. I've been watching LSU football I'm 33. I'm just going to say 30 years, okay? Because I have a picture of me when I was 3 years old in a full LSU outfit. Carter, I can make the argument besides Jarvis Landry, he's the most physical wide receiver we've ever had. Without question. I think he's going to get you some of the dirty yards. But look, man, let me tell you this. This is why I don't distrust anything that they're doing offensively. Did you see the leap that this kid had? I know the argument. Oh, but Jaden Daniels. Bullshit. I know the kid had drops, and he's got to work on that. I'm not saying he doesn't. Did you see the plays that he made this year? He caught Jaden Daniels' last touchdown in the back of the end zone against A&M, against a 5-star corner. Okay, I might add. Secondly, the best play that I've seen a receiver make, not named Malik Neighbors this year, okay, I think the play that he made against Alabama right before halftime might be the best play that I've seen from a receiver from a balanced, physical, route-running standpoint. I had an NFL front office guy for the Texans tell me that if Kyron Lacy entered the draft, they would select him in the 4th, 5th round because of the way he blocks and how tough he plays. I think the kid can come in here and do some magical. I like Kyron Lacy a lot. I love the way that he blocks. He does everything that you don't want him to do. Now, with all that being said, I don't know if he can be a wide receiver one.
It's hard.
Right? I don't think he can be really wide receiver one. He needs a dude that, he can go out there and block for. Carter, he's the best blocker since Dwayne Bowe. From a physical standpoint.
He gets after it, Blake. And then one more thing is, when I look at a player, and I get asked a lot about player evaluations, film studies, and all this stuff. All you have to do when you're sitting at home watching a player do something, ask yourself, how difficult was the play that he just made? How many replacement level players can make that play? And Kyron, as the season moved on, started making more plays that great players make, right? The run after the catch versus Auburn was really good, Blake. There's a lot of traffic. Obviously, Jaden hit him right in stride, but he broke 4 tackles against an Auburn secondary that was really good and has guys that are playing the NFL. I mean, he started doing more things as a receiver that replacement level players can't do, right? Last year's receiver, Kyron Lacy, was about a replacement level player, right? You could put
a hitch along the sideline. Right. That's all you would run.
Right. And a lot of it, of course, is Jaden getting better, but Kyron took a leap, right? And
massively,
it's hard work.
Massively.
Yeah. It's hard work. It's people believing in him in that room. And that was obviously a guy that if you're at practice every day, that's why LSU was so much higher on him than everyone else. But in actual games that everyone could get to see, you had the drops. But you saw him starting to make some special plays.
That's got to get fixed. That's got to get fixed, Carter. I mean, come on. I mean, I can stick up for him all the live long day, but he can't drop the football in critical situations.
Got to catch it, baby. Got to catch it.
And here's another thing. He's going to have to catch him from a guy who, quite honestly, throws missiles. Who does not have a touch ball. He does not have a changeup. Like, let me tell you something that I know for a fact. Okay? Nuss has to work on this, and this can be an issue. Dude, he's ripping players' gloves at practice. He's throwing the ball so goddamn hard. Now, I know it for a fact. Dude's gloves are being ripped. Pause. He's ripping it wide open.
That's what happened to Anthony Edwards, man. You got to be careful out there. Allegedly.
All right.
But
we talked about JD5 not going in the bowl game. Surprised that Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. and Brian Kelly are playing this bowl game. I am a little surprised myself, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I am too. Like, I would have probably said that, hey, they would have said, look, I'm done. But that record obviously means a lot to Malik Neighbors. And honestly, Blake, it's more so the lack of opt-outs for LSU, the lack of players that have entered the portal. Now, especially with Sage Ryan, who, as you know, Blake, like a lot of people watching this right now, wasn't the biggest fan of his this past year, but comes with all this experience. Maybe he is deciding and having a shift in judgment. Maybe his market for his services isn't what he would expect it to be. Up to this point, Blake, outside of Sage Ryan, there's not been a significant contributor that's entered the portal yet for LSU. And this would be what I would bring up to every person watching this right now, and I bring up on my streams and all that stuff, is where has that not happened? You know, there are significant contributors at A-list universities that have entered the portal that are at top.
Not happening at Bama. Bama and LSU are the only places it's not really happening. And we're about to talk about Ole Miss in a minute. Bama and LSU are the only places it's not happening.
And Bama's in the playoffs, so you really don't know what anyone's going to do just yet. So that speaks to something, whether you believe in the Brian Kelly culture or not. It was practically somewhat the same thing last year. So you have two consecutive seasons where you didn't really, and once again, that could change. There's a lot, wink, wink, nod, that could change in the next week and a half. I'm just pointing out something that I've seen, that there's just not anyone significant. That's happening at USC. That's happening at Georgia, happening at Florida State. These are big, big, big universities where this is happening. So I have been really impressed with the retention, and hopefully that could change, obviously, in the next week or so. But that does excite me from a Brian Kelly point of view.
Yeah, and we'll see what they look like at practice tomorrow. All right, last topic I got for you here. Ole Miss. Let me just leave this open-ended to you. Thoughts on what Ole Miss is doing?
But they're going to be tough, man. I mean, these are a lot of guys that would be drafted that are transferring over to their program. From an LSU standpoint, obviously LSU is going to be one of their first tough games on the season, but LSU does get a bye week before they play them, and Ole Miss will be on the back end of a back-to-back road game and their last game of 7 consecutive games. So their bye week comes after playing LSU. So you get them in a good spot in the schedule, but the main point is they're doing really good things. Now, why is this important? Well, it might not be all that important, Blake, because you could potentially lose that game and still get in the playoff. The flip of that, though, this last year, Blake, was the Ole Miss game would have cost LSU the playoff this year if it was a 12-team format. It objectively would have. That one game would have changed your entire viewpoint.
Having the argument, should we be in there above Missouri because we beat them on the road?
Right. That and that would and look, that is a tough argument to make with them having 2 losses to 3 losses. I would put LSU in because you do have the head-to-head, and LSU played a far more difficult out of conference than Missouri did. But then again, this is always the case in college football. Avoiding losses is more important than winning games. And LSU just had more losses than Missouri did, and they handled their business and had some really impressive wins down the stretch. So, look, I got to be real with you, Blake. That Ole Miss game, how we view this season would have changed drastically. Now that they are good, that does make them a tougher game, but it's not as important as it would have been if the playoff would have stayed at 4.
I said this on Ruffino and Joe show last night. They're the diet version of what Florida State did a year ago. Like, they have a lot of players returning, a quarterback returning, a really good running back returning, offensive lineman returning. But, Carter, it's what they're doing along their defensive line that's going to make them a little bit more of a nightmare. I get from an LSU standpoint that you have the O-line that can compete with them no matter – like, I'm not worried about LSU along the offensive line. They play other teams besides LSU, right? With that being said, Carter, they can be another 10-2 team at worst. They're 10-2 right now. They're 10-2 right now, right? So I think they're the diet version of what Florida State is. Here's the biggest thing for me. Carter, who do you think led the country in sacks last year? Or this year? This year.
Sacks or sacks allowed?
No, who do you think had the most sacks defensively in the country this year?
Let me think off the top of my head. I'm going to go Texas A&M.
It was Penn State.
Oh, Penn State.
Penn State had 48 sacks on the year, averaged 4 a game. Ole Miss just added half of that in the transfer portal. By the way, Walter Nolan's not here. Oh, and let me just add, they have a kid that wears number 4 named Perkins, too, who also had 7 sacks or 6 sacks, whatever it was. I'm going to tell you something. If you think that Georgia's going to walk into Vaughn Hemingway and doesn't have a chance of being upset, you're an idiot. Carter, I can't believe I'm about to say this. Their roster defensively is loaded because they're going to get Walter Nolan. Again, they're adding Carter. They could lead the country in sacks and nobody would know it.
Only 4 road games too, and
only
8
4
games
road games.
8 games at lot. So no tough neutral siders, easy non-conference. It sets up nicely for them. And Trey Harris was a little overshadowed by his really good friend Malik Neighbors this year. Trey Harris was a really good football player for them. Obviously, a Louisiana native. And
it was.
And yeah,
and
this is
Carter. They're adding another receiver that's going to go off.
And Lane always gets his tight ends wide open, and they're going to get even more open now that they have bona fide studs on the outside. So they're going to be scary good next year. I really do. I really am buying their stock. And Lane, once again, these 2 10-win seasons. That's the thing on my SEC channel, Blake, that I thought Lane hit a ceiling. I was wrong. I did not know that they had what they had up their sleeve for the portal this year. And I give Lane a lot of credit for sticking it out Ole Miss. And look, if he really makes a push at a national title at Ole Miss, it would be one of the best coaching feats in college football history if he's able to win a title there.
Well, let me say this. Let's just say, argument's sake, that roughly the same exact thing this year happens next year in the 12-team playoff. Carter, they're playing Penn State at home.
It's crazy. It's crazy to think about.
And I'm going to tell you something. Just going to let you know, they're going to win that football game.
Ooh.
They can't score. You know why? Because look at what they're doing along their defense. Drew Eiler is not going to put up 20-plus points on that defense. He's not going to do it. Y'all think I'm playing. And look, I'm going to have people unsubscribe to the YouTube channel because I'm saying this. They're making the playoff.
Oh, you're already there.
I'm there. They're the diet. Now, barring injury, Okay. Carter, Jackson Dart's returning. Like, name a quarterback that has been in Lane Kiffin's system for 3 years. They're going to make the 12-team playoff. Carter, if you think they were good this year, they're going to be better next year.
Okay. So for them to make the 12-team playoff, Blake, they're going to need to only have 2 losses. If they only have 2 losses, they're getting in. Okay. So they lose.
They can lose to LSU. They can lose to Georgia.
And they can win out. Yeah. I mean, you could really see it. I mean, I think Oklahoma is in a difficult spot next season. They don't have to play Alabama next year. They don't have to play Texas. They don't have to play Tennessee. It sets up nicely for them. It really, really, really does.
Christian, I don't care what you call it. The facts are the facts. And if you don't want to hear the facts, I'm sorry.
Oh, but Christian's coming in hot, baby.
He's coming in hot. Hey, Christian, would you like to place a small wager?
I might side with Christian though, man, because it's Ole Miss, Blake.
Get a backbone. What the fuck are we talking about? Get a backbone. Go somewhere else, because reality is what you're going to get on this show. Have a backbone. You did, Christian. I bet you $100 you didn't know they weren't playing Bama next year.
Come on, Christian. I got my lumbar support back here, man. I got a backbone, son. I got a Peter Millar I'm sitting on.
They're going to make the playoff too.
I believe they are going to do it. But here's the thing, Blake. If they do make the playoff, would you say right now that Alabama and Georgia are both making the playoff next year?
Yeah.
Okay. So then that leaves LSU. Will they get in? Do you feel pretty good about LSU getting into the playoff next year?
As of right now, no.
Oh.
LSU's not getting in the playoff next year until they have so many question marks. Carter, you don't know what they're going to be like at quarterback. You don't know what they're going to be like at running back. You don't know what they're going to be like at receiver. By the way, you return arguably the second worst defense in the SEC next year. What do you mean? Am I going to put them in the playoff? No, right now I'm not putting them in shit.
If Matt House,
tell me you're going to come in here and put them in the 12-team playoff?
Well, let me ask you this: do you think Brian Kelly needs to make the 12-team playoff next year?
No, because it won't matter. We're not firing him. He ain't got to do shit.
Okay. I'm just making sure we're on the same page here.
No.
Okay. So
go ahead.
So if Ole Miss gets in, I have a tough time believing with what Texas is bringing back next year that they won't get in. Are you a believer in Texas?
Right now, we're saying that if everything is equal, like the argument was, in this process, if this next year's playoff would have been this year's process, okay?
Yeah.
They would have gotten into the playoff. Here's the problem. I agree. They are better. They are better. Barring injury, they are better next season than they are right now.
You think Texas is going to be better next year? This year?
No, Ole Miss. Okay.
Oh, Ole Miss. Okay.
All right.
No,
I'm putting Texas in there. I'm putting Georgia in there. I'm putting Alabama in there. That's 4 teams. You cannot convince me right now that with all the question marks that LSU has, that you would put them in the playoff. You can't do that.
But here's the thing. I'm going to agree with you because I don't think they can do it with Matt House as their defensive coordinator.
And I don't think that they are, but I'm just Carter.
Right.
What have they brought in? Okay, let me just throw this out there. Let's just say you got Bill Belichick as your next defensive coordinator, for crying out loud. You legitimately were in the hundreds in passing yards allowed. You were 80s in rushing yards allowed. Okay. Scheme is one thing, but I also saw you got pushed around by Ole Miss Literally last year. Carter, they ran for 300 yards on our ass. They ran all up and down on our ass. I also remember Jalen Milroe going stupid on our ass. Guys, I am a LSU, Carter, I am an LSU homer through and through. What I'm not going to do is just come out here and spit bullshit to people that isn't true.
I'm with you, Blake. Trust me, I've been on the wrong. I've been on the wrong end of LSU criticism a lot. I do agree with you. Right now, LSU in its current state is on the outside looking in, but a lot could change from now until then. You can add a portal guy here. You can make a coaching change there. But I think this year, and this is like one of the more sad things about this year, Blake, is I do think the SEC was down. I do think there was a lot of teams that fell under expectation. And I think next year the SEC is going to be very strong. I really do believe it. I think Tennessee is going to be really good. I'm really high on Nico and what they have going on. Obviously we said what we said about Ole Miss, Alabama and Georgia's Alabama and Georgia, Texas is Texas. But if you are an LSU fan, and we haven't really touched on this since I really wasn't on the show when this happened, but I think LSU schedule sets up pretty nicely for them as far as the SEC portion of it. So that's also a good thing going in LSU favor.
I agree with that. Like I think I like the way that their schedule is broken down. I like it a lot. But Carter, you have just as many question marks in next year's team as it sits right now than you do. Carter, it's 2022 all over again. A lot of ways.
And this is going to be the big thing that I think a lot of LSU fans are going to need to answer, and a lot of the LSU coaches are going to need to answer. There's a lot of guys that are going to come back to this team, Blake, that didn't play at a championship standard at all. And they were but here's the issue with that, Blake, is they went in to this last season with a lot of hype. There was a lot of people that felt pretty good about some players on this team, and they underperformed. Those guys are going to have to look at themselves long and hard in the mirror for LSU to take this next step and be those guys. And a lot of those guys are on defense, but some of those guys are on offense as well. So for them to take that next step, you're going to need those guys to say, look, this is our time. It's our money year, right? There are some of these players thought that they could have gone to the NFL this year. So hopefully those things take place.
Adrian Bailey with a $4.99 super chat says Tackett Curtis just entered the portal. Carter, I thought he had a horrible year. But
yeah,
I'd take him.
Yeah, I mean, athletically, he is very, very, very gifted, right? But it's a tough transition in how he played high school football his final season to then flying across the country, going to Los Angeles, and playing in the mess that was Alex Grinch's system. So, yes, based on talent, based on profile, you want those types of athletes to be on your team, Blake. But it was tough. It was really, really tough. There was going to be transition because when he was at Mania, they just put him out there and they said, go tackle everyone, right? They put him in that deep safety spot and he just mowed people down. That's just not how football, is played at the collegiate level. I think he could have a year or two break. I could see it, right? Because for his recruitment, LSU had a tough time getting in from the get-go, even if Orgeron and all those people were still the same. It was one of those things that if you really understood his recruitment, it never really was going in that direction. But I would
did everything he could.
Yeah, it just
did everything he could.
It just didn't. Sometimes some guys just don't want to, go. And there's normally one elite guy in every class. This year was Wardo Mack. There's always going to be one that you're just not going to get because they just weren't ever going to go there.
Carter, the Power Bryant. You know what sucks is I'm going to get so much hate mail, Carter, about me. Oh, Blake Ruffino's being so negative on LSU.
No, I mean,
just being realistic, man.
Bring on the haters, baby.